Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Are you or your team performing all possible vendor validations? Do you know which documents have the key data you need to confirm that the vendor you are about to create or update is real? Be sure by downloading the vendor validation reference list. It also has links to all the resources listed. Download at www.deborah, D-E-B-R-A, R. Richardson, RICHARDSON.com. If you are like many AP teams that are now starting to look at implementing or maybe even upgrading AP automation tools, then you need to listen to my guest today, Rhea Galsim. She will discuss audits as a way to evaluate cloud-based applications to protect your company from potential data breaches. She'll also talk about how to reduce risk and stay cyber safe when using these cloud applications. So keep listening. Welcome to episode 87. Audits to evaluate cloud-based software providers for your AP automation project. Now, my guest today, this is actually a part one of a two-part interview, and the second part of the interview will be on the organization that my guest volunteers for, which is called CSNP, and it is a nonprofit organization that provides free cybersecurity education and training. So if you're interested in listening to that part of the interview, please check out episode 88. That will be published on June 18th. So please enjoy part one of the interview. Today, I have a great guest, Rhea Galsim. She describes herself as a witty, driven, adaptable, and optimization-focused individual who has the experience and the know-how to connect technical requirements to meet business objectives. She also has a blog at distillsecurity.com where she just finished a very timely three-part series on remote life. Welcome, Rhea. Can you tell us about your background and kind of what you're up to now or what else you're up to now?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rhea. And again, thank you so much, Deborah, for having me here on your podcast. So I would definitely talk a little bit more about my background. And my background is very unique because I have experience in both marketing and cybersecurity. I have over 5+ years experience at a Fortune 100 company managing different types of marketing campaigns, and one of which was very influential into how I got into cybersecurity. So within one of my email campaigns, I had a segment of users who technically should not have been included in my email list. And after having gone through all of the checks and balances internally, and also being flagged by privacy just to check what actually happened, I read various articles online about data privacy, and one of which is on this website called Dark Reading. And Dark Reading is a pretty established website talking about cybersecurity practices, data privacy, cyber intelligence related topics as well. And so that really boosted my interest in cybersecurity, and that impacted my next steps. I decided to shift over fully into cybersecurity by going to a program based in Chicago, which is a cybersecurity bootcamp called Evolve Security. And Evolve Security is also a penetration testing services firm. So from there, I was able to be an apprentice where I worked with a nonprofit client and at the same time learning a variety of cybersecurity applications, software, different types of security policies, and just learning how to secure up data and also how to protect against various cyber threats.
So let's talk about then, we have AP team members in leadership that are returning to offices, not all, but some are returning to offices post the shelter in place as a result of COVID-19. Pain points while working from home included things like, access to invoices that only came in via mail and payment delays for those vendors that were paid by check. And then when they did get paid by check, the checks got returned because they weren't at the office to collect the mail. And so now many of those AP teams, those companies are looking to automate these functions or other AP functions with cloud-based software platforms. Those pain points are fresh. What can these businesses start to think of when evaluating these cloud-based applications and protecting themselves from potential data breaches?
Right. Yes, definitely. I totally understand the need to automate the processes to
Mhm.
make things a little bit less in person because of the logistical issues, especially today coming from COVID. Majority of
Yeah.
stores are still closed. Banking has been delayed. And for example, I know during a few weeks ago, I had to make an appointment to go to the bank because the banks were closed. And you have to wait online and they give you a number that you have to call to make your appointment. So it's very, very difficult right now. I'd say things aren't going to be as quick as, all right, let me just, run down to the store and run down to the UPS or anything like that. Now everything to me has to be a lot more digitally based and people have to start leveraging a lot of the online applications and cloud-based applications. So, as a business, I think it's very important that businesses of whatever the size of the AP business or just in general, businesses should remember that there is no one size fits all solution. I think it's very important to say that. I'm pretty sure businesses know what their objectives are with using these cloud apps. I feel like the majority is probably centered on just reducing that in-person footprint of having to go to locations and then having to deal with things getting lost or delays and dealing with that frustration. So really the cloud-based app is available for users so that they can, automate that process of having to go in person and also just free up their time. So that's a great thing about the cloud-based app. You don't have to spend so much time going somewhere. You can just do it at the comfort and at the leisure of your own time. So when it comes to adopting these cloud apps, I believe there are two types of services that most companies, once they do a Google search, right, they'll find out about a service called a CASB. So CASB is also acronymed as CASB, which stands for Cloud Access Security Broker. And these brokers are also they can be owned by a smaller company as well. So, for example, there are different companies that are certified in being a CASB broker. So they provide the services for you. You just have to call them up and then understand or try to get a RFP, which is a request for proposal. And the
Okay.
RFP is very important because you're able to see through all of the agreements, all of the different types of service level agreements, and you can kind of assess from there just what the services are from a CASB. It is a system and a security tool that protects your data. And this is great if you are working from home or if you're in between traveling to different offices, if you have to travel to an office, or if you're sitting at your car or if you're going out at a park. CASB is definitely the system and the application that protects against potential cyber attacks or any data breaches. And so how a CASB actually does that is that they really have different types of security controls already bundled within their services. So
Mhm.
these security controls include firewalls, DLP or data loss protection, which is essential for sensitive critical data. So I would say like your banking info or your client's banking information, that would be classified as very sensitive and that would fall underneath the DLP provider. And also different data encryption standards. So I will talk about that a little bit later, but having a CASB that manages not just your firewall setup, your DLP, and also having the data encryption standards being to the best standard as it should be for what's going on today and for companies that are online now, it's definitely a time saver, right? So you'll be able to run your business and then have this provider that really looks through all of your network architecture, whatever that could be, and then help you as a partner to make sure your data is being protected. So if you don't want to go through another company that is a CASB certified provider, there's also other solutions that could be a little bit better. If you don't want to have to deal with another set of folks, right? If you just want to do it yourself. So there's also a CASB underneath the Microsoft business. So it's called the Microsoft Cloud App Security. And then also another company called Netscope. So these are all CASBs that anyone who, regardless of their experience, can run by themselves, with the caveat that they understand some degree of IT and networking, and just taking the time and on how to learn the variety of security controls. So I do believe when it comes to CASBs, you do need to have a bit of more understanding of the technical side of your network, just because you want to be able to assess what's really going on, right? And you can't really do that if you don't have some sort of knowledge. But of course, all this knowledge can be something you can discuss with Microsoft support team or Netscope support team as well.
And this is great because I had never heard of the acronym CASB or CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. So I will definitely be Googling that after this podcast. But it sounds like it can be that IT team that you don't have as a small to medium sized business.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So I mentioned CASBs because they're starting to become very popular, because they are a lot more focused on the folks who are traveling remote work. So that's again like one of the areas that I really believe is going to keep growing, is just the amount of remote employees who are working outside of your internal network because they're no longer going to a corporate office, right? They're going to be working at home. And so having a CASB provider, or at least knowing what a CASB is also very important, just so that you can see that there is a solution like this available.
Just to put it in perspective, like where does a VPN fall in that whole activity of, working from home, traveling? If I travel or I'm working remotely somewhere else, I will sign into a VPN and then work. Is that a part of what the CASB will recommend or will monitor, or is that something separate?
Yeah, I would say CASBs, they mostly focus more on the different types of network architecture. So like your firewall system, and your DLP. For VPNs, that might be available, but I haven't seen so far that that's something included as part of the CASB. So VPN is also essential for your website traffic. That's primarily why it might not be as a part of your CASB, because CASB is focused on just the different networking and the back end of that. Yeah. So VPN is definitely something that I use as well. And there are different types of VPNs out there. Some of them, they say that they're free, but they're really not great. And really it's because of the privacy aspect with VPNs. So some VPNs, VPN providers is another name for that. Some of them are not reviewing your IP history. Meanwhile, there are some VPNs that actually keep track of your IP, which is the whole privacy battle with different types of VPNs.
And
So,
I thought I read somewhere, but I could be wrong, that some of those free services really just in turn sell your activity.
Right. Yeah. So it really, for the most part, yes, from what I've seen, really the VPN, because they are tracking your, for the most part, they are tracking your location, and basically the VPN is just masking your location with their own IP address. It really depends on the data center that collects all of that information. And that data center may fall into different regions of America, or they could be based in different areas around the world. And so that's where that data could potentially be used by law enforcement without you even knowing that they needed your data. So, and this is all dependent on where you're located and where that data center is located. So
Yeah.
that's the tricky part with VPN. So I think for the most part, majority of VPNs like NordVPN, they aren't really tracking your location, and we call that no logs. That's another name for it,
Okay.
where they're not keeping a log of your actual IP history. But of course, every business has to do their due diligence, and
Yeah.
we can't really, and that's the hard part. Like having that time to actually do the due diligence is another thing that a business has to keep in mind.
Yeah. Sounds like we need to read the fine print.
Yes. I know it's painful. That's why we do this podcast, right? We do these blogs because we want to make sure people know, like, hey, I read this for you, so you can make
Right.
that business decision.
Going back to, evaluating and getting that RFP and selecting a cloud-based application for these pain points that APT members saw working from home, what type of audits apply to AP and businesses in general for these cloud-based applications?
Yeah, the great thing with a lot of these cloud-based apps is that they are part of these large organizations already
Mm-hmm.
that have to give assurance to a lot of different regulatory, state and federal regulatory boards of bodies. So it's great that you can go to these different companies and they already take care of a lot of those requirements that are given by um, the variety of regulatory systems out there. So when it comes to cloud providers, understanding what they do and how that impacts your business, a AP business has to really review, like we mentioned earlier, just the fine print and understanding through their initial RFP or through a service level agreement, just what the cloud auditing process looks like. So usually a cloud audit includes a review of the overall network of a cloud provider, how that data is being managed and who manages that data, and assessing the overall IT risks and also any system vulnerabilities out there. It's also important that the cloud provider lists out all of their potential or past incidents,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's also very important to know if there was an incident that happened to this cloud provider that now manages your data, just how did they go about remediating the problem? And to do that, there usually is an incident response plan. So there's a team that actually goes through a process to make sure that they isolated the issue and they try to protect the network as much as possible. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
important to hear that from a cloud provider, just how and what their process is, and that gets captured within the cloud audit. The cloud audit also goes over the different types of policies and procedures, any tools used for like monitoring the network, and also any change management documents, whether it comes to implementing new processes so that a cloud provider can stay up to date and making sure that data is protected. So there are different types of audits, just to talk a little bit more in detail as to what cloud audits apply to cloud providers who manage these cloud applications. So that it's also helpful to note as well that the audits are not required actually. So these are not required audits, with the exception of if your company is a publicly facing company, so you're a public company, you're on the stock market, or you're trading stocks, or you
Okay,
provide services for those companies, yeah, then you would have to adhere to SOX, which is Sarbanes-Oxley. So that
right.
would pertain to you, that's required. But if you're a cloud provider and you're not dealing with financial reporting, then you don't necessarily have to go through the different types of audits and certifications that come from audits. So the main cloud providers, for example, Google Cloud, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Service or AWS, they adhere to a lot of the different types of audits already done. And a lot of the CASBs, or a lot of the cloud-based applications that utilize cloud, definitely use these different types of vendors for their back-end data protection support.
Yeah.
So one audit in particular that comes to mind is the SOC 2 audit. And the SOC stands for System Org Control, or Organizational Control. That was something that I had to really look up because I'm so used to hearing SOC 2 and I don't really know what the SOC part stands for. So SOC stands for Systems and Organizational Control. It is a audit report that shows the different security controls for managing your data within a cloud service provider. And it is based on a trust service criteria. So this is something that if a company is a cloud service provider, you will see, and if they are a SOC 2 certified provider, they will have this trust service criteria. This is definitely something across the board is being used by those who have the SOC 2 audit. So this is the availability of data, the confidentiality, so the confidentiality of data, and also processing integrity and privacy. So what this means is a cloud service provider has to adhere to different types of networking protocols, defense-related initiatives with their networking infrastructure. So that can be a firewall again, access control policies. So just making sure to limit different access privileges, setting up two-factor authentication in addition to just using your password, encryption standards, so using the latest encryption standards, which is usually 256 bits. And then also making sure that there is a business continuity plan for any type of disaster. And then also monitoring the network traffic through using the firewalls or different types of security tools.
So and you know what? Thank you for telling me what the acronym SOC 2 stood for, because I've heard of that, but I didn't know like what it really meant. So it sounds like if you're dealing with a third party company that is SOC 2 certified, then that's really good. I've also heard of SOC 1. Like, what is a SOC 1?
Right. Usually SOC 1 happens prior to SOC 2, but a lot of cloud security vendors or CASBs, they have already gone through SOC 1, so it's not really that important. And really what SOC 1 is focused on is reviewing controls and procedures that are related to financial reporting. Meanwhile, SOC 2 is not really focused on the financial aspect. It's mostly just focused on maintaining those trust service criteria. So the criteria of availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy. That's really the focus of SOC 2. And it's not necessarily tied to your financial reports.
So does that mean, I believe I just heard you say that if a third party provider has a SOC 2, then that means they're really SOC 1 and SOC 2 certified?
Most likely, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what should the frequency of these audits be? And what do AP and companies, what do we really need to show during these audits? I'm assuming the SOC 1 and SOC 2, if I'm remembering correctly, is that annually?
Yeah, so it's annually or semi-annually. And the reason being is that a SOC 2 has to be done by an actual CPA firm. They have to be an independent CPA firm that comes in and reviews all the different types of security controls and the networking systems. And then also it requires a long period of time. So we can't do this audit quarterly. That is a bit short on the
Right.
timing of amassing all of this audits. It wouldn't make sense to do this on a quarterly basis, but on a 6 months to 1 year basis. There's also another audit that I'd say is also very important, and I in particular look at it from a AP standard. So if I'm a e-commerce business, most likely I am dealing with credit cards as well, right? So there's also the PCI DSS
Oh
audit,
yeah,
which
yeah.
stands
The
for
PSI or
yeah,
PCI. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
yeah. So the Payment Card Institute, which worked
Mhm.
with credit card issuers like Amex, Mastercard, and Visa, and any company that really deals with credit cards or business deals with the processing and transmitting of cardholder information that has to go underneath the PCI compliance and the PCI audit. So there's like 12 requirements for PCI. I'd say PCI is very strict. They have also 4 different levels of their requirements based on the merchant transactions. And this is also done on I believe on a quarterly level, and can only be conducted by a QSA, which is someone who is certified from the PCI Institute to actually assess the different security controls. And so just to back up a little bit, a PCI DSS is really focused on making sure that credit information is really secure. And how that happens is by making sure that there are network firewalls, there's a PIN right in place of your point of sale system. There are very well listed out password policies and password management procedures. There's a patch management policy as well for patching any system vulnerabilities. There are employee trainings around passwords, so it's very, very lengthy. And also the most important part of PCI DSS, I believe, is really making sure that these credit issuers or anyone who uses a credit card information, that the data is not being retained on the system and it's only retained for a short-term period of time. So that's definitely the PCI DSS focus. It's definitely integral to companies that are, in e-commerce or other small businesses.
So it sounds like PCI, DCS, SOC 1, SOC 2, what sounds like should be annual audits. If you're a small to medium sized company and you don't have that staff that is knowledgeable to like manage that, it sounds like we're going back to, or we can go back to what we talked about earlier, which is a CASB to manage that. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to manage individually if you were to single-handedly look through all the regulations and what the different types of data that you're processing, whether it's credit
Yeah.
card data or if it's directly via the bank, which is like ACH. So I
Mhm.
would recommend in general trying to look at cloud, and that's where the cloud-based app comes into play,
Yeah.
because you can go through a company that already has the human resources as well to manage all of these different types of regulations and then also manage your data. So these folks are also trained on how to, look through your sensitive data, how to classify that data, and just to make sure that's up to date. And that alleviates all of the time, and it helps with automating just all that responsibilities and giving the business owner just their time back so that they can run their business and just manage their time better.
Yeah, and do they also help with, because privacy laws are out there, GDPR, they've been enforcing that since May of 2018, although it was implemented or enacted a couple years prior. Now we have CCPA that's began enforcement January, I think it was January 1st of 2020, so this year. And now we've got the New York Shield Act, which I think that was enacted in March, and I think they'll start enforcing that at some point this summer. I think it was June 1st, but I'm not sure. Will they also help with like all those privacy issues?
Yes, so I would definitely say for sure that these cloud-based providers, they definitely are aware of the different regulations when it comes to where your data is stored. And I know
Right.
it's very tricky right now just because you can have customer information and they could be based in Europe and that would fall underneath the GDPR. Or if your company is based in California, you would have to follow through the California Privacy Act, right? Or I believe it's CCPA.
Yeah.
So that's the great part about having the cloud-based provider because they are able to do that and they have a staff of folks that are, reviewing this material and working with their own internal teams to figure out how that would apply so that the actual end user, which is the customer, isn't feeling bombarded by or feeling overwhelmed, right, as to like where should they even start or what they should do, and how frequent they should think about this. And that's why it's also good to mention just these types of audits so that if I'm a business owner, I'm shopping around for different apps, then I can be able to say, hey, this company should have SOC 1 and SOC 2. I should know if they're publicly traded. And it's great to know that. And you can find that on a lot of these companies. And I would also give a great mention to Bill.com. Bill.com is they also use the cloud for storing variety of business transactions. And
Hmm.
so you can be an AP business and you can use Bill.com, and they are already using everything that we're talking about so far. And then also they are doing a lot of security trainings for their own staff, which is great. And it's always great to see that up front on a company website. Like, yes, we're doing security awareness trainings. We are doing all these different sets of policies just to make sure that our own staff isn't getting isn't falling through with cybersecurity practices. So
Yeah.
that could be a great alternative as well.
Yeah, and so on that note, then, what are some other cyber-related initiatives that AP and companies can do to reduce their risk and really stay cyber safe using these cloud applications?
Yeah, I think it's very essential for businesses to really think about the entry points of where they are storing their information. So, what I mean by that is trying to think about how they access these applications. So, how they access it is usually through logging on to a website. And so, I break it down further. I think about, like, wait, let me think about my password, right? Because I use a password to log into this website that is now storing my client's data in there. So I need to make sure that my password isn't a short password. It is a little bit of a complicated password. And also using a password manager, which is another long topic that we can talk about in detail.
I
Uh-huh.
switched over to a password manager last year and it has been absolutely great. I don't even know what my passwords are. I don't need to.
Oh,
I don't know how many upteen digits long, and it's great.
it's fantastic. It is probably something that needs to be advertised more and more often. That password manager saves your life because I'm the same. I don't know how many passwords and I don't know how many apps I have. So
But
having a password manager keep that and be able to log in using the password manager is very helpful and it saves so much time.
yeah, and the one that I have, it has a mobile app as well. So when I go on those same sites on my phone, I get
Mhm.
the same service. So it's absolutely great.
Yeah, it's
Highly
fantastic.
recommend those.
Fantastic. Yeah. So password manager should definitely be used, saves a lot of time, makes life a little bit easier, and also prevents someone from trying to take your password because you could potentially leave you could write your passwords down somewhere and someone can take it if you leave it outside. There's
And
also, uh-huh.
no more putting them on a sticky note under your keyboard. So
Oh, believe me, I have seen it and I still see it to this day. So yeah, so there are other things a business can do to reduce their risk, like also installing two-factor authentication apps. So this is something I mentioned a little bit with the security controls that some of these cloud providers do. And this is what they recommend to their employees and to us as well, is that these two-factor authentication apps, really, it's like an additional layer. That's how I see it. It's an additional layer. You can install it on your phone, which sends a one-time code that you can use when logging in and using your password. It really just identifies who you are. So this two-factor authentication app it is another way to protect your data because you have to log in with this one-time code instead of just logging in with a password.
Right.
So other than that, as a business owner in general, I think businesses should also always reevaluate their different types of role-based privileges on their computer network. So just making sure that this is something that they can do fairly quickly. It's just to look at the different users that are on their computer system, making sure that you're only giving information to users on a need-to-know basis, especially when it comes down to sensitive details like your credit card history or your banking info. Like, I don't believe everyone should have access to that unless that is literally your job description.
Yeah, and I preach that to accounts payable teams out there. Do audits of who has access to your vendor sensitive data. Not everyone needs to see the tax ID. Not everyone needs to see the bank account information. At least not the full one. You can mask it, and only show the last 4 or 5 digits, and they're able to identify that it's the correct vendor. But that least privilege access is definitely something that should be done on a periodic basis. And one of the things that I remember when I was in corporate is that people would leave, people would transfer to another department, and really making sure that their access changes when those personnel changes happen, and that doesn't always get done. And so that's another thing to put on the list. And it's good if you do this on a periodic basis, because then you will catch it.
Right. And I think that's the part that's always missing, is that you can start off really well, right? You can you can review your role-based privileges on the first month, but you have to keep up with it. You can't quit after your first month. You have to review it at least. I would say try to review your role-based privileges and your security policies I'd say on a quarterly basis. I would I put calendar invites on my own calendar saying like, yep, this is the end of a business quarter. So within this week, maybe we can try to review some of these security policies. It seems very trivial and very easy, but believe me, it can get lost with time and busyness of everything going on. The one last thing I wanted to mention as well, which I started using recently, is really encrypting your emails. So this is something that if you use Gmail or Office, there is already a encryption protocol, which is called TLS.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, when it comes to, like your social security number or your credit card info, this is to me like really, really sensitive stuff. Like I want that additional layer just to make sure that in case someone gets access to my account, that there is some protection beyond just the standard TLS encryption. So there are these apps that you can download as a plugin within your browser. And these are usually available for Google Chrome, or if you use a Chrome store.
Okay.
And so these plugins are CipherMail or FlowCrypt. These are the two ones that are definitely top of mind. And basically, what this does is it gets installed within your browser and within your email client. So for example, your Gmail. And then there is a digital signing certificate. So that's what happens normally when you have a email. It does have its own digital signature and has its own, we call it PKI, or there's a public key exchange that goes on in between the different types of servers, from my server to your server. So this plugin is able to also provide that additional protection so that only the recipient will be able to decrypt. There's actually a decrypt button. So there is a button there that says decrypt on there if you're also installing this plugin. So the only caveat is that your friend or your client has to also have this plugin installed so that they can be able to see the actual information within your email. So I think this is really good if you are sending this, very sensitive information. I wouldn't use this if I'm just, emailing naturally, but if you're, involved in sending medical records, and for some reason you're using your Gmail, which technically you should not be using. You shouldn't be using your personal email. But in general, if things like that happen, it's always great to have that additional layer, like a solution such as CipherMail or FlowCrypt.
Yeah, and for small, particularly small businesses and probably medium sizes too, that are still using, Gmail for their business account, or even, the Microsoft Office, the business standard, one of the business subscriptions. This will work with Microsoft Office as well, or Outlook.
Yeah, I'd say I'm not quite sure what Outlook, but it definitely does work for a Gmail.
It does work for Gmail. Yeah, that's probably applicable to quite a few out there listening. So that's good information. This has been great. I'm sure we could have spent hours more talking about cyber safety out there. Maybe we'll bring you back, after we figure out what happens in September and beyond with this COVID-19 and the continued pandemic, if it resurfaces again, because I'm sure we'll have more to talk about.
Oh my goodness, definitely. And happy to be on here.
Can you let the audience know, where they can go to connect with you and then to get more information on CSNP?
Yeah, so folks can reach out to me directly via my email address, which is rayag@distillsecurity.com. They can also go to the blog, which is distillsecurity.com. And also, I'm very active on Twitter, so feel free to follow me on Twitter. I feel like I make the best connections on Twitter. My handle is @SoundsLikeRhea, all lowercase together as well. And I can also leave that in the description just so it's clear. Yeah. And also the CSNP website, which is very easy to spell out. It's just csnp.org. And so anyone can, check out our webpage and you'll see myself on there, and Deborah, you're also on there. So yeah, you can definitely reach out to us via those channels or those methods as well.
Okay, thanks, Rhea.
All right, Deborah, take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 87th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.